The land on which we learn, work, and live is Treaty 6 territory. This place is a traditional homeland for the First Nations and Métis peoples, and today we are all part of this treaty land. Traditional name for this place is Amiskwachi Waskigan, which we also call the City of Edmonton. Welcome, everyone. I'm Cecile, and I'm the coordinator of the Maji Center, and Dale is on as well, and Dale is our expert. What is your title, Dale?
Lead entrepreneurship consultant. We spent a lot of time workshopping that one.
Yeah, and I'm happy to introduce Craig Sherburne, who's one of our mentors. He's also and has been involved with the Maji Center, I think, for 3 years now, if not more, because it was right before COVID hit. We started working with you, Craig. And Craig is a legal counsel and works a lot with businesses in Edmonton as well, knows a lot about the startup environment as well. And so I'm happy to pass things over to Craig.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And this talk, I think, came out of spite. So maybe I should disclose that first, is that this is a talk that I had gone to a number of workshops that were presented by lawyers, and miraculously the lawyers were standing up and telling everybody should do this thing that you should come to me to pay to do. And so I'm going to be a lawyer who's going to talk the other side of it, answering the question, should you incorporate your business? Basically to tell you the strengths and the weaknesses, and that for some people, incorporation is something you should look at in the future. For other people, maybe it's the right idea now, but we'll kind of step through and answer that question. But before I hit that question, let me answer in a descending order the 5 most common entrepreneur questions I get. Number 5 is when do I get to sell? And that's easy. It's when somebody wants to buy you. That's it. It doesn't get much more complicated than that. How much will you get when you sell? It's going to be the least that you're willing to take and the most that they're willing to give. If you want further details than that, we're going to have to go through the process. But really, that's the root of it. How much of my business do I have to give up to an investors? That's a similar answer. The least that they will take and the most that you will give. That's a simple one. What terms do I have to offer for investors and financiers? I always get a chuckle out of this one. Trust me, they're going to tell you what they want. They will not remain shy on that. They might ask you to pitch something out first, but I can guarantee you anybody who wants to provide you financing or anybody who wants to invest in your business, they have clear ideas in mind of what they want for it. But the number one most common question I get from entrepreneurs is, do I need to incorporate? And so I take this as an opportunity as much to educate and as much to flex my muscle as a part-time jokester and full-time dad. And so if I'm going to give an example, guys, I'm going to give you an example that I appreciate and one that makes me chuckle. So for the purposes here of our discussion around incorporation of the challenges, I'm going to tell you a story. And this story is about our first-time entrepreneur, Archibald Reginald Wilkins III, who likes to go by the name Archie for short. So Archie has this brilliant idea. He realizes that he has some strengths and he has some passions. And one of the strengths that he has is as a salesman. He really enjoys the act of selling and feels that he has a skill at it. His second, he's got a passion, and that is for lemon lime flavored drinks. And so he decides that he's going to create 2 products. This is innovative and a brilliant idea. He's going to create a lemon lime flavored soda, and he's going to create a separate product, which is a lemon lime flavored laxative. And he's a smart salesman. He's a smart businessman. So he realizes that he can do some cost savings here. He is going to use exactly the same kind of can, and he's going to use the same time and form, or same type and form of label. Cost savings here that he can buy in bulk, but he is no fool. So he is going to firmly affix a sticker onto the laxative that says, this one's a laxative, because he's a bright guy. So here we've got a business where he's going to go do door-to-door sales selling soda and laxative, both of them lemon lime flavor. So he says, I think I want to incorporate Bob's Sales Inc. And he wants to do this for 3 reasons. He wants to create this company because he first wants to tax his profits under Bob's Soda and Laxative separately. Second, he realizes that it is possible that his business might get sued. He reads about lawsuits all the time in the newspaper, and he read somewhere that if you incorporate, then you might be able to protect yourself from lawsuits. Finally, he's worried that he might get doxxed. Number one on his list of people who might want to find out who he is pro-constipation activists. So he wants to be able to protect himself from that. So therefore, he's going to call it Bob Sales Inc. so that nobody can find out where he is. He goes down to the registry's office. He pays $400. He gets 5 pieces of paper that says, "Congratulations, Bob's Sales Inc. exists." And Archie heads off into the wild to start his door-to-door sales campaign, selling his lemon lime flavored soda and his lemon lime flavored laxative, knowing that he is safely tucked behind a corporation that's going to protect him from all ills, I should say. So now there's an accident. This is a terrible tragedy, and this tragedy happens where he sells his lemon lime flavored beverage for a wedding proposal ride where a celebratory soda at 1,500 feet goes tragically wrong. Clearly, they had drank not the soda but the laxative, and he has some very angry and potentially litigious customers that are coming after him. So now the question comes, what did incorporating help? So with that story in mind, we're actually going to take a pause, put a pin in that, and we're going to talk a little bit about what is a company anyways. When you incorporate, what does that mean? Well, a company is actually defined in law as being a person. So it is legally a person. So companies can hold property, they can enter into contracts, they can conduct business, they can pay taxes. Now, you have to differentiate that, though, from an individual, because an individual can hold property, enter into contracts, conduct business, pay taxes. But individuals can do some things that companies can't do, like die, or give a gift, or throw a baseball, or walk into a room. A company is a legal construct. A company's physical nature is essentially a bundle of papers sitting in a room somewhere, if that. So how is it that companies can do the things like hold property, conduct business, pay taxes, if they can't even do something as simple as throwing a baseball? Well, a corporation has no arms, it has no minds, it has no pockets to hold things, no hands to sign contracts. It needs to have individuals, people who can throw baseballs, doing things for the company. And the start of the people who do things for the company are the directors. All right, title, power, and authority of a corporation rests with the directors of that corporation. They are oftentimes referred to as the brains of the corporation, but if there is nobody other than a director in a company, and when you create a company, you must create a company naming at least one director. Maybe they're the hands as well, although we'll address that a little bit later on what normally happens, but they are the brains of the company. They provide the big picture and the day-to-day direction to the day-to-day operators of the company. People think of directors, think of board of directors, think about board meetings. Board meetings happen on a regular basis, sometimes annually, sometimes quarterly, sometimes monthly, where the board comes together and makes a decision, which they would then pass on to the other individuals within the corporation, guiding them on what to do. Who are those other individuals? Well, they're the agents of the company. And those agents can fall into 3 different categories. But you can think of the agents as the eyes, the ears, the hands of the company. These are the individuals that are doing things. The brain is telling them what to do. So of the agents, you've got the officers. These are the day-to-day operators. These are the people with titles that you get used to seeing: president, chief executive officer, chief financial officer, things like that. You have contractors. These might be lawyers, accountants. They could actually be service providers that instead of hiring employees, you hire a person under contract. Their powers are limited by contract. The officers' powers are passed down from the directors to themselves as part of their employment agreements. The employees, well, their powers are also limited by contract. And if you've ever had an employment agreement, you will see usually a line in there that says you can do the following things, or you can bind the company, or you can't bind the company at any time, even though you're an employee. These are important considerations for a company when it's hiring agents. Now, all that power that's in the hands of the directors, it I like to think of it as flowing like water from the directors down to the agents. The top of the waterfall are the directors. If they choose, they can pass down some of the water down the chain to the officers. The officers can take that and pass it on to the agents. If of course the directors gave them the power and authority to do it. But the key here is to remember that everything starts with the directors. Now, going back to our example that we had with Bob's sales, what if the shareholder, the director, and the officer are all the same individual? And I just used a word here for the first time today, shareholder, that I hadn't talked of before. So let's really talk about what a shareholder is. Because Bob, when he said, if I create a company, I'm going to be able to isolate myself from the liabilities of the company, what he was referring to is the shareholder is isolated from the liabilities of the corporation. So what's a shareholder? Well, a shareholder is somebody who holds a share in a company, and they have at least one and up to 3 rights that come with that share. And every share must have at least one of these rights. If you have a share, you have a right to vote at the meetings of the shareholders, which has to happen at least once a year. You have a right to participate in the profits of the company as the directors decide to share those profits. And you have a right to receive the assets on winding up of the company. That's it. That's the 3 rights a shareholder has. Those are the 3 rights a shareholder has by virtue of holding a share under the Business Corporations Act. There are some other weird rights that pop up. A shareholder has a right to complain about what the company does under certain circumstances. A shareholder might have a right to receive audited financial statements of a corporation. Those do exist, don't get me wrong, but these are the 3 key things that come with owning shares. So a shareholder is a passive role. You are limited, you have limited liability to the corporation. By holding a share, you owe the company nothing. You don't have to vote. You don't have to take the profits of the company as they are shared with you. You don't have to receive the assets of the corporation on wind up. It is a right to receive the assets of the corporation. It's a right to receive the profits. Because they have limited liabilities to the corporation, by law, they also have limited liabilities for the action of the corporation. If the corporation goes and does something, by virtue of being a shareholder, you are not liable for that thing the company does. There are a few specific examples, though, mostly relating to environmental protection laws, because a lot of bad actors for a long time were making a mess by spilling oil or gas or natural gas, leaving uncapped natural gas lines or exploratory wells. And they were saying, oh, well, we're a shareholder, you can't sue us. And so there have been laws, both provincially and federally, that have come in to say under certain circumstances, just by being a shareholder, you can be liable for something the company did. But most of the time, if a company goes and does something bad, you are not going to get sued. If Google goes and does horrible things with your millions of people's private information, if you hold shares of Google, the only thing you have to risk is that your shares will become less valuable, not that you're going to be named in a lawsuit. So now let's go back to our wedding ride. So here we had Bob's sales. He was selling both laxative and soda in the same cans with the same labels. He put a sticker on the laxative can that said, "This one's a laxative." He gives the wrong can to people that are going up for the balloon ride. They are very unhappy with what happens when they drank their laxative. Did incorporating help? But now at one level, you go, well, Archie is a shareholder. Archie is therefore not liable for the debts or acts of the company. So yeah, incorporating really did help Archie because he can't be sued as a shareholder. Well, that would be true and is true. He can't be sued as a shareholder, but Archie was also the director, officer, and agent of the company, as well as being the sole shareholder. So while he's not liable as a shareholder, he is liable as a director for engaging in risky behavior. He is, and risky behavior, why would you have a can that's, one can that has soda in it, one can that has laxative in it with exactly the same label? That's risky, that's crazy. But he was also an officer who was carelessly supervising the application of the "It's a Laxative" label at the warehouse. Maybe he was the officer that chose a water-soluble adhesive, so that the label, if it was cooled down, the label would actually fall off because of the condensation. Archie was also the agent that picked up the cans and passed them on to the newlywed couple that were about to get onto a balloon ride for a proposal. He handed them the wrong cans. So he might have actually saved himself from being sued as a shareholder by putting the company in between the customer and himself. But that didn't stop him from being the director, officer, and agent of that same company that was doing these things. In other words, I'm not so sure that the incorporation prevented him from getting sued. He's still going to get sued because he was the guy, the individual that did the bad thing. So when a lot of people create companies, they think themselves isolated and protected from the liabilities of the company. And that may be true technically. But if you are the sole director, shareholder, officer of the company, then there are many liabilities that you are not isolating yourself from. And we'll step through one of the sneakier ones the banks do a little bit later. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some huge advantages to having a corporation. You do get to isolate the liabilities from the shareholders. So if you're a shareholder in a company, but you're not a director, officer, or agent, you are relatively well protected from the liabilities of the company, subject to those few rare laws that are out there, mostly related to environmentalism, or environmental damage, I should say. It is an independent person. It can hold property independently. It can pay taxes separately from the shareholders. All of these things can be really, really good. It can have multiple shareholders, which means there's an easy way to divide profit between people by simply saying, well, how many shares are out there? How many shares does this person? How much profit how many shares does this person have? Well, you can now calculate what percentage of the share ownership they have, and you say, well, how much profits do I have to distribute? So companies are a great way to be able to sort that out. It's a great way of sharing assets on wind up. Who gets what? Well, we just have to look to share ownership. It's also a great way to put multiple people together, all with a common goal or purpose. A single business, all in mind, sharing that single business. It's a great way of doing it. And frankly, let's come out and say it. It's so easy to create one, because to create a company, all you need to do is to go to the registry office. Now you can even do it online. There's some great and not so great websites that are out there that allow you to create companies online. You can start to issue shares. And step 3, as all good steps 3 are, profit. And this is a huge mistake. There are a ton of problems that I kind of categorize into these 5 categories that people run into when they go off and create companies. And so I've talked a little bit about how companies might not be what you want them to be, or the benefits of having a company. Let me tell you about the landmines that are waiting for you out there, just to be aware of them. Just to be careful so that you don't get up one Sunday night and decide to create your own company and fall into one of these traps. So the first problem are the legal requirements. 4 or 5 pieces of paper from a registry office does not make a corporation. The law is very clear as to what a corporation must be doing even after you walk out of the registry office. You need to have organizational minutes or resolutions of both the shareholders and directors. You need to maintain you need to maintain shareholder registers and directories of the registers of the directors. There is paperwork and formal requirements that you need to follow. You need to file an annual return every year. You need to file a new tax return every year because it's a separate entity. It's a separate person under law. It has to file its own tax return. You have to have a registered address and records address. And this refers back to Archie with Bob's sales. So Archie didn't want to be doxxed in my story. So he was going to create this company. Well, if he went in and created the company and set his registered and records address as being his home, then he's created a public record that directly connects him to this company. The registered address, this is where corporations can be served documents. So if you want to sue a company, you sue them by serving it to their registered address. Well, if you've set your home as your registered address, well, companies get served legal documents differently than individuals do. Companies get served legal documents by leaving them at the registered address. You have a company, you go away on vacation for 2 weeks, you come back and find out that you were served 13 days before with legal documents by them just leaving them on your doorstep. And you had no clue, which might be a good thing. It meant that your vacation was better than you otherwise would have been. But that can also be a pretty bad thing because 13 days have passed and you have been legally deemed served because they dropped them off at your doorstep. The records address, many times people have the registered records address. I'm going to say most of the time it's the same address, but people can attend, anybody off the street can attend the records address of a corporation and demand to see certain documents, register the shareholders being one of them. And do you really want your home to be where somebody can show up and do this and demand your records? This is not a huge deal. It is rare that people will show up at your door demanding to see a list of your shareholders, but it can happen. And as a lawyer, I've actually triggered that and done that a number of times with people. Just be aware that when you create the company, these addresses are now public. And so you're not really protecting yourself from information theft or from doxing, if you will, if you are going to use your own home address as these addresses. So be aware of that. Next problem, securities. The securities laws in Canada, like most countries, are complex and huge and thick and constantly changing. The legal phrasing for securities laws in Canada, which with respect to shares, says no share can be traded absent a reliance upon an exemption to a prospectus requirement or by otherwise complying with applicable laws and regulations. That's the legalese. The practical impact is you can't sell a share. Just don't. You can't sell shares. You cannot sell a share unless a professional tells you you can. And everybody that's on the phone says, I hear shares are sold all the time. I have a friend who started a company and he sold shares to his father and gave some shares to his neighbor. I understand what is done all the time, but the securities laws are very, very clear that you must either, one, have a prospectus that is issued and registered, otherwise known as be public, or two, you have to fit within an exemption to be able to issue a share. And there are plenty of exemptions that are out there and available to you, just not as many as people would want. And if you're going to sell a share under an exemption, you have to make darn sure that you know which share or which exemption you're using, and to make sure that you meet all the regulatory and reporting requirements that you've got. You can give shares to friends and family. You can give shares to wealthy individuals. There are exemptions out there for it. But if you do so, really talk to a professional first before doing it. What will sometimes, no, oftentimes when it's a problem in my office, is where the best of intentions come back to haunt you. And sometimes they can haunt you for bad reasons. Somebody that you sold shares to is now using the securities or your failure to fulfill the securities obligations as a reason for them to get their money back when otherwise they wouldn't have been able to get their money back. Or it can happen at the best of times. You have somebody who wants to buy your corporation. They want to buy your business. They want to invest in your business. And you are now going back and realizing that you had done some things early on in the company's career that you need have to address now. Those are the best, though. That's the best case scenario, though. There are other consequences. People go to jail for this, civil lawsuits, fines. You're not going to go to jail for accidentally not filling in the paperwork of giving shares to your neighbor, but you might go to jail if you accidentally give shares under false pretenses to 30,000 investors and collect $80 million. That's the jail one. But it does start with fines and civil lawsuits and frankly, just a red face as investors come in and go, we don't think your company was validly incorporated. And we think that you were giving shares out outside of securities laws for the first 3 years of your existence. That's the last thing you want to do when this is supposed to be good news because you found somebody who wants to finance your company. Next loophole or next hurdle is taxes. Corporations are taxed as an independent person. So at a first level of analysis, well, that means you've got to file another tax return every year. And trust me, the CRA knows when you open your companies now, and they will send you a document that says, please file your taxes, even if it's a nil return. It does open up some additional opportunities for deductions by having a company. And frankly, if companies are taxed, at least for Canadian CCPC, Canadian Controlled Private Corporations in Canada are taxed drastically lower than individuals are taxed. Your corporate tax rate as a Canadian Controlled Private Corporation that's accessing the small business deduction and other deductions, you essentially are looking at around a 20% tax rate for your profits. You compare that to a 40% tax rate or higher for an individual that's making more than $100,000 or $120,000 a year. Well, that means that you're paying substantially less taxes as a corporation than you would be if you were to be making that profit as an individual. And that is great when you're profitable, but it's not so great when the company is losing money, because what you've done is trapped those losses inside the corporation. Where if you would have kept it as a private, what's called a sole proprietorship, you would have just operated the business as an individual, well, then you could have used those losses to offset your daily income from your day job. But because it's in a corporation, because it's taxed as an independent person, those losses are trapped in there. You can't access them. So, you never start a business with a plan to fail. I'm sorry to say that most businesses that are started fail. It's just a fact. The numbers are better if you're working with people like the group at NATE, and with good advice from people like Dale and Cecile. But the fact is that businesses fail, and so if you create the corporation and it fails, those losses die with the corporation. The second to last is shareholders. Maybe a little, not to get too literary, it was the best of times until it was the worst of times. If you thought that Thanksgiving was difficult because of your weird uncle's politics, a Canadian wearing a MAGA hat at Thanksgiving does seem to be an odd one. Well, wait until he screams at you, "I want my money back, I pay for your salary." Taking money from friends and family is a great way of turning family into not friends and friends into people who used to talk to you. You want to make sure, if you're going to be taking money from people, even if there's a securities exemption available to you, that you get it all on paper. Make sure everybody understands what they're investing in, what they're not investing in, what they're doing, and what the expectation is for what's going to happen to this money. You have to explain to people that every business is high risk. It's not just a good idea. This is the law. There are certain exemptions that require all the investors who are providing money in exchange for shares under certain securities exemptions. They have to fill in a form that just simply has in giant letters, "This is a high risk investment. You might lose everything that you put in." This is the way the law is. Even if you don't need to have that done, it's a good idea to make sure they understand it. Do a shareholders agreement. Companies, unless you do things a certain way, companies cannot force somebody to give their shares back. So once you've given them shares, they now have certain rights, and those rights will continue so long as they have shares. So it is a great idea to have a shareholders agreement that lays out in clear terms and something that people sign. What are the expectations of the shareholders? How are they going to work amongst themselves? What's the company going to do on behalf of the shareholders? What are the reporting obligations the company is going to meet and abide by? And preferably get the breakup language in writing. How is it that we are going to say goodbye to each other in an amicable or non-amicable fashion? But now contractually, there's never going to be a world where the shareholders who hate each other have to get up into a room every year and vote as part of a shareholders meeting. Get some breakup language in writing, and any decent lawyer is going to be able to help you with this. Finally is company property. And there are a lot of people who incorporate, but they don't go through the extra steps of documenting what it is the company owns. If you own 100% of the company, then you really don't care what the company owns, because you're the same person that owns what you own and you're the one that owns the company. Well, that can get a little blurry later on down the line. And sometimes it's done to your disadvantage by the damned banks, my number one most hated group that's out there. So banks are infamous for, when you open a bank account, they will ask you to file a personal guarantee. And you go, what, a personal guarantee for what? I'm putting money into the bank. And they go, but don't you want a free credit card? Don't you want a $500 line of credit? Don't you want something? And they will get you to sign a personal guarantee. Well, now all that isolation from the liabilities of the company that you were talking about just disappeared, because now with respect to the bank, what the corporation owes the bank, you have now guaranteed as an individual. I've found credit applications coming into my clients for things as simple as a water delivery for bottles of water for offices. And at the bottom of the forms for the credit application on behalf of the company, somebody will throw in a line that says the individual signing this represents that they will pay the debts of the company as they become due. And it is a backwards way of trying to make the individual signing the form liable for the company's debts. When you're talking about a company with 800 employees, like it happened, and somebody who is but one of 45 people in an accounting department, that is wrong. When you are an individual and you are a shareholder and director and you're signing this form, you might accidentally be creating an attachment point for a liability that you never intended to do. Brand ownership is something, a brand is an amorphous concept. So how do you assign your brand to the company such that the company owns it? These are steps you can do it. You just have to fill out the right paperwork. Documentation. Make sure that there is a piece of paper so that when you have this company, you can point to what the company owns. Trade secrets, idea ownerships, again, piece of paper. This is where you would write down to say, I am not only the shareholder and director and chief executive officer of the company, but I am going to assign all the intellectual property of anything that I have come up with respect to the company to the company. Important pieces of paper to be able to document what it is that the company owns. Inventory, this is a real common problem. Storage locations. People think of and are worried about a theft of their inventory. They're worried about fire destroying their inventory. But there's some weird things that can happen if you haven't properly documented what your inventory is. You're storing all your soda cans, and you can't afford a warehouse, so you store all your soda cans in your room that you are renting from a homeowner who rents you a room in the basement. If the homeowner has his house seized for some reason, they go bankrupt, they're doing criminal activities, something happens. Have you documented that soda is yours and not the homeowner's? Have you documented that room is yours and not the homeowner's? You have a friend who has a warehouse, and so you store a couple of pallets of your inventory in his warehouse. Have you actually written the piece of paper that says that is your product in their warehouse? Many people go, no, I trust my guy. He's my best friend. He would never do me wrong. Well, what if your best friend gets incapacitated? What if your best friend dies unexpectedly? Now you're walking into a warehouse with somebody who's never met you, saying, no, all that stuff is mine, and you realize that you should properly have documented what is yours and where it is and what is the company's. Second to last slide, take away from this, and I'll lead into questions if you have any. But there is not one size that fits all when it comes to a company. Businesses have life cycles. Businesses may start as sole proprietorship and then later become companies. There's ways we do that all the time. Tax-wise, we can do that. Legal-wise, we can do that. You don't have to start by creating a company. It might be the right thing for you to do in your business, or it might not. It might be that the balance of the tax benefits or the ability to isolate the assets and clarify and crystallize that the business is operated by this corporation, well, that far surpasses any of the benefits that you would perceive to get from the liability side. That's possible, but it's also possible that you're just creating a company because you think that's the right thing to do for what your business is, and it might just be a spending of money that you don't need to do right now. A piece of the paper from the registry is not enough. There are more things you need to do. You don't have to go to a professional to do it. There's create your own, next to the legal will kits at the registry office, at those turnstiles, you'll normally find a package of documents that are incorporation documents. Those are fine. Read through it, follow the instructions, do the things that you're supposed to do, and 2 thumbs up. You don't have to go to a lawyer to do it. But if you're not going to do that, then maybe you should go to a lawyer to do it. Be wary of some of the online incorporation websites too. There was one in particular that it would incorporate, and I think there was a discount to it, so you can incorporate a company for $575, something like that. And so there were many people that were going to incorporate it, and then they would say, "Oh, I want to change shareholders." And oh, you want to change shareholders? Absolutely. The online website will help you change shareholders too, but you have to upgrade your subscription. And it was $1,200 to upgrade your subscription. Well, now that means that their incorporation cost was $1,700 in order to incorporate and change shareholders. Where if they went to a law firm, even a most expensive law firm, that would have been $1,200. So you always invariably, if somebody is offering you a deal and it's online, they're trying to get the money from you somewhere else. So just be aware of that. Be aware that there are better websites to incorporate with than others. Ask people like at the Mauji Center where they recommend, and take advice from people who've experienced it to see where you should go. It can provide asset protection, but only if you're set up correctly and only if your operations are set up correctly. So you want to be careful that way. Make sure that you do the paperwork to get what you want the company to own into the company. Put it there, protect it. Very important to actually go through and do the paperwork. And perhaps the most important one is to use different labels and cans for your soda and laxative business. Don't use the same damn cans. If we can learn anything from Archie in our talk today. And with that, I will go to the gratuitous slide that says who and what I am. And I'd be more than happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Jackie had a few questions in the chat. So it started off at the beginning. She asked, isn't that why you have a director's liability insurance if you're incorporated?
So director's liability insurance will have limitations on it, and it will generally avoid and not cover things where the director has willfully or grossly has done willful misconduct or been grossly negligent in their activities. So you're absolutely right. Directors and officers liability insurance will protect you from many things, but you could have also gotten that insurance as a sole individual as well. If only people had said to me, "Craig, I incorporated so I could have D&O insurance." It just doesn't happen. They instead say, "I incorporated so I didn't have insurance," and that is not the right answer.
Right. She also had, now, and I'm not sure when this was in the presentation, but isn't it why you would set up multiple classes of shares when you incorporate? Since those losses are inside the corporation, wouldn't that just be a matter of paying the shareholders back for the shareholder loan?
So there's a couple of things buried in there. So the first thing is that we do not have flow-through shares in Canada. There's this thing called unlimited liability corporation that was created that I've never really seen effectively used in Canada, but there is no flow-through for losses of the company to the shareholders. What you can do, though, is you can structure the way that shareholders put money into the company so that you can try to control. Oh, Jackie, we'll move to you in a moment. Yeah, we'll be there in a second. You can certainly create different ways of bringing money in. Instead of the individuals purchasing shares, they buy shares for a nominal amount and then lend money to the company. That's a great way of trying to isolate the losses, so that if their loans are not repaid, they can claim the loss on their side. Certainly a great way. Jackie, let's move. I think it was your question too, wasn't it? Yeah, okay. Maybe I'm not seeing a chat screen. Give me a moment to find a chat.
Jackie, can you unmute now? And you had a question?
No. Oh,
Nope.
I think those were two different questions. The first is having to do with creating or selling shares.
Okay, then her and Landon both wanted to know at what point do you have to go from unregistered sole proprietor to registered sole proprietor?
There's no have to. There's just some signs of some things that you might be looking at. So when you are hiring your first employee, you might seriously be considering doing it as a corporation. Just simply from isolating employment liabilities down to the company, you are now registering for not only a GST account, but also a tax CRA remittance account for tax withholdings. So if you're hiring employees, you should be seriously considering incorporating. If you have somebody who wants to provide you money in exchange for receiving a piece of the business, if mom and dad are going to give you $5,000 to help you get off your to get your business up and running, that's different. If Uncle Bob says, I want to give you $5,000, but I want 30% of the business, that might be a point to actually look at creating a company in that point, because the contracts and documents that you would have to create to give your uncle 30% of your business when you're a sole proprietorship are very large and complex and complicated. The documents that you would have to create to give your uncle 30% of the business when that business is run by a corporation is called a share certificate, and it's much simpler. It also forces you to take a look at the securities exemptions, because the securities laws in Canada do not see a difference between you promising to give 30% of the profits of your business as a sole proprietorship, or you giving 30% of the shares of a company that's operating a business. Under the securities law, that's both the sale of a security. And you just wouldn't think of it as being a security, though, when it's between you and Uncle Bob as a sole proprietorship. So that's the point that you want to be looking at a company as well. Those are the two ones that come to my mind.
Okay, and Enrico has a question. I want to make sure it gets addressed before he has to leave. Enrico, did you want to ask it, or do you want it to go off the chat?
I can ask it. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. You mentioned that, or you advised that you try not to personally guarantee credit applications from banks. How then does the corporation do it? Does it have to ensure then that the credit application is under the name of the corporation and not under an officer's name?
So the banks are insidious. I'm gonna tell a story instead here, okay? So Enrico, you look like you work in the hospitality industry.
Right.
Restaurants. I've got a number of clients that are restaurants. So they go and they borrowed. This client went and borrowed $120,000 from the bank to open their restaurant. The bank said, I want personal guarantees and I want a security agreement with the company so that I have a security interest across all the assets of the restaurant. They opened up the restaurant. They succeeded. They paid off their loan for 4 years. 4 years they were operating quite well. Then COVID hit, and then they got a CETA and they got a HAZCAP, or I think I've got those right. So they got some assistance from the government because of the COVID. Now, the government realized it couldn't put any money directly into the hands of individuals. The government has a very effective system of taking money from taxpayers, but it's not really good at giving money to taxpayers. One-way valve. So they decided they were going to pair up with the banks, and they were going to say to the banks, I'll tell you what, banks, we're going to give you billions of dollars. You give it to the people who need it. So they took their HAZCAP loans, they took their CETA loans. They then came to me and they said, actually, Craig, we're thinking we're in the company. They survived COVID, but they didn't survive after COVID. And so this is happening with a lot of businesses. And they said, we're going to have to close the doors. And I went, okay, well, that's sad. Let's take a look at the company. And we realized that the bank had taken personal guarantees and had taken a security interest over all the assets of the company 5 years before. They had paid off the loan, but the bank didn't release the guarantees and it didn't remove the security interest over all the assets. We contacted the bank and the bank went, oopsie, geez. Problem is, you kind of owe us $300,000 right now. And the answer was no, but those are backed by Business Development Bank of Canada. We shouldn't have had a personal guarantee with the bank. It should have been deleted. We shouldn't have had a security interest against the bank. It should have been deleted. And the bank went, if wishes were fishes, but we're not going to release it now. So that tale is to tell you, A, you can't get away with not giving the banks personal guarantees if you're borrowing money. You can't get away with security interest if you're borrowing money. But ask the question, do you have to borrow the money from the bank? When I have clients who come in and they open literally a $500 line of credit, I can't remember, a deposit protection or it was $500. And they signed a personal guarantee over all liabilities they may ever owe to that bank forever and ever over a $500 $500 line of credit. That's crazy. If you are going to take large loans, make sure that when you pay that loan off as part of your celebration, you not only get a cake and have a party, but you then get a release of the security agreements and the personal guarantees released. Don't forget it, because the bank will forget it. The bank may not even give you the release actually when you show up, because they may say, well, we're going to just keep this in line in case you ever do owe us money. Then you move banks if that's what they're going to do. That's the key. Nobody cares about you at the bank. They just pretend to. So that would be the long warning I would have. Okay. Let me tell you how much I hate banks even more here for the next 10 minutes. Enrico, if you have any further questions, I know you have to go, bounce me an email, connect with Dale. Happy to answer.
Okay, and Landon had a question. Scroll it up here. So he said, which would you say is better for protecting yourself from liabilities? Incorporating or getting insurance, i.e. I'm a welder and deal with potential risks from DOT, OHS, etc.
Insurance every day of the week. And it's really because they're doing two different things. Insurance is protecting you from liabilities. It's saying if an unexpected event happens, then we are going to step in and pay on your behalf. That's what insurance does. Incorporating, well, the main goal of incorporation is to create a separate legal entity to be able to funnel and channel assets and liabilities through and to focus down what a business is. The main goal of a corporation is to allow multiple individuals to participate with a common goal and to have a structure relating to how they can interact with each other and how they would receive the profits. So they really focused on doing two different things. But unfortunately, many people treat incorporation as isolation from liabilities. And there are many law firms and lawyers who might not see things the way that I see them. And that is, a lot of people are incorporating way too quick. Save your money. The $1,200. I charge $1,200 to incorporate a company. That's in the upper end of the medium side of the scale. I've had people who paid $3,000 to $5,000 to big law firms, and I've seen it as low as $500 through an online facility. You've got better things to do with your $1,200 than give them to me to incorporate. Unless there is some reason that you're incorporating to be able to, that advances your business case. I'm a big fan of take your money and do not mistake spending money as advancing your business plan. And that is a real problem for early stage entrepreneurs and businesses. I know I'm a multiple time entrepreneur myself, a serial entrepreneur, one might say. And it is really tempting to walk away and say, I just spent $1,200 on stationery and business cards and feel like you've done something to advance your business. And you haven't. You have not. That was money that was better spent on acquiring a customer or confirming a service or refining a product. And there are a lot of companies and businesses that are out there that are lurking, and they are seeking to separate you from your money. And they realize, either explicitly or implicitly, that if they can make you feel like you have advanced your business plan, then they can separate you from your money easier. And that will be promotion pen companies. I keep getting pins saying, your business, you would have a lot more clients, Craig, if you just had a better pen with your name on it. It is possible. I doubt it, but it's possible. But then when I incorporate companies here in my office, I will be inundated by people saying, you should get stationery, you should get business cards, you should get pens, you should get a website. None of those are, it is possible, but highly unlikely that any of those really advance your business plan.
Okay. Jackie had another question. As a consultant, many opportunities want you to be incorporated. How would you push back on that?
So depending on the day of the week, I would say, if you ask me, on some days, I would say 40% of all business is driven by tax. And on other days of the week, I'd say 90% of all business is driven by tax. It's really a tax issue there that they're looking for. So as a company, if they hire a company as a consultant, they're never going to be accused as hiring you as an employee. And that's all driven by taxes and remittances and responsibility and liabilities for tax remittances. The pushback on that, well, frankly, they've got the money and you need it. So maybe there is no pushback. Maybe there isn't. But it is driven mostly by tax side, whether they know it or not, of why they want that to happen.
Awesome. Are there any other questions?
Those were a ton of good questions, though, I got to say.
They were a ton of good questions. Yeah. So I want to thank you, Craig. Thank you so much for covering this. And I got to tell you guys, when a lot of people think, oh, we're going to be in a session led by a lawyer. It's not going to be boring. Not with Craig. He's going to find a way to tell us the story that's going to be engaging and get the point across at the same time. So really appreciate you taking the time to lead us through this session and probably save a lot of people a lot of money in many ways, just by having the thought process out there.
And if only to have the most laxative intensive presentation of the year at Mauji is really what I'm aiming for.
Landon says he's going to be reaching out to you in the next few days to further discuss his business and concerns.
Well, happy to answer, Landon.
Okay, awesome. So thank you, everyone. Have an awesome rest of your day. And hey, spring is just around the corner.
Tell the weather that. Thanks, guys.
Yes, I know. Goodbye, everyone.